Good morning, everybody. I am getting ready to load a quilt onto my Bernina Q24, and I decided to create a video from start to finish of the quilting process for doing a quilt on your Bernina Q24. And I will post this in sections because some people may not need to see how to load a quilt, and some people may not need to see how to set up the software, etc. So I'll do this in stages so it also won't make for long videos. But the first step in getting ready to load your quilt on your long arm is knowing how big your quilt is. So I've taken the width of my quilt and folded it in half because that way it'll be easier for me to measure it on my table ruler. So if I fold it in half and I'm putting the half mark, it doesn't matter which end, but I'm putting the half mark down here at the 1 inch and I'm stretching it all the way down. So that gives me to the 34-inch mark. So if I double that, that means my quilt is 68 inches in width. Now I need to measure the length of the quilt. So the width of the quilt is the way I will load it on the machine. So let me see how long this quilt is. So same process, I'm going to just fold my quilt in half. And I'm going to measure on the ruler from the 1 inch mark down as far as it goes. And again, I'm just using the fold because it's just easier for me. All right, so with the 1 inch mark, I measure this. So I'm going down, it measures to about, and you don't want to stretch it. You just want to like lay it. So I'm going to about 43.5. So if I double that, that's 87. So my quilt is 68 inches by 87 inches. And I can remember that, but just for the sake of helping other people figure this out, I'm just going to take a little sticky piece of paper, if I can find my ink pen. I have a gazillion of them around here. And I'm going to write down it's 68 inches by 87 inches. So that's my quilt size. So if I need to refer back, I'll have it just written down on a piece of paper. I'm going to stick it out of the way because I'm going to need my cutting table here in a second to cut my backing. Okay. So if my quilt is 68 inches wide, that is the measurement that I need to figure out how big to make my backing fabric and my batting. So I'm going to start with my backing fabric first. I want my backing fabric about 10 inches longer. So if my quilt is 68 inches, I want to cut my backing fabric at 78 inches. So let's go over here and get my backing. Got this really pretty Tula pink print that I've been using on the backs of all of these quilts. Now these quilts are quilts that I made out of my grandmother's clothing. She passed away about, not quite, December will be 2 years ago. And I've been making quilts out of her clothing for family. And it's just been a long process because I had a health issue myself that I had to deal with. And I also still work a full-time job, so I only have the weekends to work on things. All right, so I need 78 inches of my backing fabric, and I don't have the best table here for measuring. I'm going to try to make some room, but I make it work. So I'm going to stretch out this fabric, and I hope I have enough left on this bolt. If not, I have another bolt that's similar to this print. All right, so, and I don't care if this is a little bit wider. So if I start kind of down here at the end of my table to start getting my measurement, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go to about the 34-inch mark. So it just gives me more room. So here's 34 inches on my table. And I'm just going to grab the fabric right there, stretch it back down to the 1 inch mark down here, roll out some more. And if I go to the 34-inch mark again, that's the size of my quilt. I want 10 inches more because you've got to have a little room to get the quilt on the frame and to be able to put your clamps on and without your machine interfering with any of that. So I'm going to measure about 10 more inches from there, which will be at 44. So about right here is where I want to cut my fabric, where that big circle is. So I'm just going to move it down where I've got more room. And I'm going to get my handy dandy big ruler. I really need to clean my room, make more room. Make sure I don't have really any wrinkles in it. And it doesn't matter if this is perfectly straight. I try to get it kind of straight, and I try to err on the side of cutting it a little bit longer rather than a little bit shorter. But I'm going to try to find, I'm going to use this mark right here on my table, which is the 26-inch mark. And the fabric is longer than my ruler, but I can kind of judge. Again, it doesn't have to be perfectly straight. For me, it doesn't. Some people might be a little more particular and want to cut everything exact. For me, I just want to be sure I have enough. If it's a little jagged on the edge, it doesn't matter because all that's going to get cut off when I square up my quilt anyway. Oh, looks like I need to change my blade because I missed. My blade's getting a little dull, so it's missed some of the threads. So that's an indication that you need to change your blade. I'm sure you already know that. If you're quilting and sewing, you already know when your blade starts skipping fabric, it's time to change it. All right, so I'm almost done with this bolt of beautiful backing fabric. I just love this. So this is backing fabric that is 120 inches long, so it's more than enough length. So I'm not concerned about running out of length. All right, so the first thing I want to do is figure out, this doesn't really have a directional print to it, but I am going to be loading it selvage to selvage, more or less. I don't really load it completely selvage to selvage because it's more for me about how the fabric lays to make sure that it is straight and even. But it doesn't really have a direction, so it doesn't really matter which way I flip it. But I do want to find the center of my backing fabric because I do want to load this centered onto the frame, and then I don't really have to care about whether or not the quilt is centered or anything else because the quilt will just go between the fabric. So I'm going to fold it in half, find my center mark. I'm going to stick a little pin there, right there in the center, just to keep it marked. I'm just going to weave it in and out a couple of times, and then I'm going to just throw this over on my machine. Make sure my pin doesn't fall out. All right, so here's my big machine, and we're going to just throw our backing on here, kind of start straightening it out. I meant to throw it a little bit further back here. I need to get it under the dead bar. Now trust me, I have made the mistake of pinning my entire back to the quilt and then realizing I didn't have it under the dead bar, and I had to unpin everything. That's not fun. So take your time, watch your steps to make sure that you do everything in the correct step. So I'm going to come back here behind the machine, and I'm going to be sure I pull this underneath that dead bar and over the top of my rail. Let me readjust my camera here so you can see what I'm doing. I have my GoPro on, and I'm short, so I have to be conscious that I'm trying to show you what I'm doing, and you're not just staring at the table while I'm doing all the work up above you. All right, so I'm just going to kind of start pulling this under. There's the center of my quilt. Don't want to stick myself with that pin or have it come out. I need to put more slack in it so it'll come over here easier. Okay, right now I don't really care where it's laying. Just want to get it over here. And I'm going to take the center. So on your leader cloth, on your Bernina, you have a thicker, darker line that marks the center of your frame. And this is where I want to pin this backing. I want to center of my backing to the center of my leader cloth. I'm just going to put the pin there to hold it in place while I get everything adjusted where I want it. The biggest thing is making sure your quilt is straight. So when I first started using my long arm, I used to think I had to come over here and match the selvage up with the end of my leader cloth and pin everything. That doesn't necessarily make your backing straight. Sometimes it makes your backing crooked. So it's more about getting your backing straight and not whether or not you are pinning it directly to the selvage. So when you're pinning, some of your selvage may be higher, some of your selvage may be at a lower point. Yeah, I'll try to adjust my camera. So it doesn't really matter if the selvage isn't even with the leader cloth. You want your backing straight. That's your goal. So I've got it fairly even, but not so much. So you can see right here, if I'm laying this backing kind of straight, the selvage goes past my leader cloth over here, but on this end, it's a little more above my leader cloth. I don't care about that. And if you watch VG Quilting on Facebook, she does an excellent job of showing you how to load your quilts, how to load your backing, how to load your tops. So I take all of these techniques from her. These are not my techniques, these are hers. I don't want to steal anybody else's ideas by any stretch of the imagination. So I will tell you, go watch her videos. She does an excellent job of showing you how to load your quilt. But I'm going to show you here, just for anybody who can learn something from me, or you know, I may do things a little bit slightly different than she does. So as she says, and as I do, you want to kind of create a little channel here of your cloth. You want to make sure that your cloth is laying straight. I'm going to kind of make sure everything is nice and straight here. So here's my little channel. I've got my cloth laying straight. I'm not worried about the wrinkles because I'm going to steam those out as I load this onto the frame. But I'm happy right now that it's laying nice and straight. So now I'm going to start rolling it up. So let's go back to the back of our machine again. Also, because I'm short, it's easier for me to work from this direction. And the first thing I'm going to do is just oh, I got to pin it, y'all. I ain't pinned it yet. See, I'm skipping a step. All right, let's pin. Let's pin. Got some pins. And these corsage pins are great for pinning to your leader cloth. I want to make sure this is laying straight and smooth. So I'm going to just kind of smooth it out. And we are going to start pinning. All right, so I'm going to take out the pin first that I put here just to hold my spot. And it may shift a little bit. It's not a huge deal. Trust me, it doesn't matter. You want this more or less centered. You're not looking for perfection. So I'm going to repin right where the cloth is laying. And you want to just let it lay. You don't want to lift and move your backing fabric at all. You want to just pin it right where it's laying. And I like to butt my pins up as close as I can from, you know, end to end. Sometimes it's a guessing game to get it to lay where you want it. You want them really close together, and you kind of want to keep them as straight as you can keep them. All right, so I'm going to continue pinning down the side. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to pin this way down this side. You don't need to watch me pin the whole quilt, so I'm going to pause the video here, and then I'll come back once I get everything pinned.